The following podcast is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Use offer code BrokenSilicon to get 10% off tasty, healthy, and easy-to-make ramen orders at the link below. Or go to cdkeyoffers.com and use code BrokenSilicon for 30% off Windows keys and die shrink for 3% off every other key on the website. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host. There's no mascot for New Year's Eve. We'll call myself New Year's Eve Kiss Tom, as off-putting as that probably is. And I am joined today by my co-host.
We're going to go with uncreative Dan today because I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head.
I feel like we do this a lot, this caveat I'm about to say. And it's that we're running on fumes. But, you know, I think unlike a lot of podcasts, not all, obviously, certainly plenty I listen to and look up to do this similar thing. But I feel like we insist on, even if it's more inconvenient than it would be if we'd recorded earlier or later, we just want to make sure we record at the right time. And the right time for this was late at night after CES, after we had the full amount of time to digest everything from Intel, AMD, and Nvidia. Even at the last minute, what is it? Sony announced VR2, which I haven't really properly looked into. So, yeah, I mean, we do this because I think we aim to have a comprehensive take first, not the first take, not necessarily one where we took 2 weeks to think about it, but in the middle.
Yeah.
And so forgive us if we pronounce things weird, miss words in a sentence out of nowhere. We are very tired today.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would also say is we are almost exclusively going to focus on those three CES keynotes, AMD, Nvidia, Intel. We will talk about a couple other things, but I've also got a pretty big guest scheduled for the next Broken Silicon anyways, and we plan to talk about CES. There's many more days of CES coverage coming, yeah. So there's plenty of time for us to discuss anything we don't discuss here. I guess, I don't know, going into today, Dan, what were you expecting from CES announcements?
A lot of graphics card stuff for the most part, with some, nice touches of AMD CPU stuff, which, we'll get into it. There wasn't as much, well, to some extent, as much with the 3D cast from AMD, but I also think Zen 4 seems like it's probably coming a little sooner than I was expecting. So, pluses and minuses.
Or at least it's not coming later than you worried it could. Because there's always that worry it could slip to the end of next, not next anymore, at the end of this year now, 2022. And I guess I'll circle back to this point because it can't fully be made until we've discussed all of the stories. But looking at the comments and some people on Twitter, it's like there were people that were just like angry this morning before the conferences start. I noticed like AMD better deliver. We're mad. Like literally, I saw people saying AMD better not screw over its fans more, and it's like, I don't know what that means, dude. We'll circle back to this, but I guess, I don't know, you were working, of course, today. This is my main job. It is not for you. I don't know, did you check around Twitter or online in the comments at all, like like in this morning, even if it wasn't before all of the conferences? Like, did you notice any of that kind of anger from people, or at least dismissiveness towards some of the things announced?
I haven't really dug too much into the comments sections of stuff yet, so no, I can't really speak on that at this point.
All right. Well, we'll take it by case on this then. First, though, of course, as always, let us get into corrections and omissions. We have one today from Nomad Prophet. Writes in, just a quick correction from Tom. I've heard this error a few times, but most recently in Broken Silicon 131. You say that the Dunia engine is an offshoot of the Crysis 1 engine. This is incorrect. Dunia is based off of CryEngine 1, which was used in Far Cry 1. Yeah, I think I may have had something mixed up there where, let me me look this up here. Let me see. Crysis One engine. Oh, I see. In the Dunia. Okay, so I guess you're right. I kept saying it was the same engine. My understanding is the Dunia engine has some lineage to the CryEngine, and I was probably combining them and mixing up which one used it first.
Yeah, Tom. I don't know. I don't remember my old engine super well right now, so.
The point is this. Far Cry's all have bad screen tearing to this day, even on console. And Crysis 1 also had pretty bad screen tearing, if you remember, Dan. So that's what I'm remembering, is this is just, these are all family members of the screen tearing engine, which is impressive at certain things in its own right. It is, compared to other engines, but I just don't know why they can't fix screen tearing.
I mean, I don't know. I do love how pretty much every game I play now, screen tearing isn't an issue. And this isn't to say don't buy Far Cry 6 because it's a relatively minor issue with the game, but like, man, really in 2021, a game that came out in 2021 has screen tearing issues as bad as it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's honestly bizarre. But there's another thing that's bizarre, and that is these next graphics cards that were announced in December by Nvidia. Story number one, GA107 based RTX 2050 and MX 570 and TU117 MX 550 announced. So let me have a little write-up here. Over the past few months, details have continued to leak regarding Navi 24 and Arc SoC 2, and they both unsurprisingly seem poised to blow away NVIDIA's low-end laptop offerings. Since the Pascal generation, Team Green has used the 10 to 25 watt MX series to fend off AMD's APUs, and occasionally Intel's ever-improving APU performance as well. But therein lies the problem. Well, the MX 150 in 2017 was based off of its own tiny die from a cutting-edge node in architecture, and they have since then only ever used dies that are 1 to 3 years old in tech. This changes with the MX 570 and 2050, right? Because, again, I think this is worth emphasizing, and I've seen this talking to people in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord. When the MX series first came out, it sounded a little silly to me until I learned they literally engineered a die to just have as the full die a 64-bit bus and use 10 to 25 watts. And it honestly, when it came out in 2017, blew away APUs, used like up to 15 watts if you undervolted it in laptops. You could get it to perform a lot like a GT 1030. It was impressive. But yeah, since the MX 150, the 250 was a rebrand, just 20% higher clocks. And the 350 was some bastardized cut down 1050 to a 64-bit bus. And that's basically been the pattern. Then the 450 was the TU117 cut down. And yeah, I mean, it's just hasn't been cutting it. Anyways, get back to the write-up. This changes with the MX 570 and the RTX 2050. NVIDIA is releasing 2 new products based on GA107, the same die used in the laptop RTX 3050 and 3050 Ti specifically to target Arc 96 execution unit, Arc 128 execution unit, and Navi's 24's performance and efficiency. The RTX 2050 seems like a replacement for the aging GTX 1650 Max Q, which I outlined in my video. It's like literally the same TDP, 4 gigabytes. It's clearly their attempt at making this 1650 more efficient and having some RTX features too. And the dies previously meant for the 1650 cards seem now to be meant for the MX 550 and lower products. So anyways, in summary, the RTX 2050 is a 64-bit 4 gigabyte version of the RTX 3050, constrained to the 1650 Max Q's power consumption of about 25 to 35 watts. It should outperform the 1650 Max Q by about 15 to 30%, while now offering DLSS and ray tracing. Additionally, the MX 570 is effectively just a 2050, constrained to even lower power and often with only 2 gigabytes of VRAM, but it has the latest latest NVIDIA 8 nanometer node. Well, I guess latest, not including A100, uses 8 nanometer instead of 12 nanometer. Let's just say that. And that way they can have kind of a premium MX card again. And then the MX 570 is a 64-bit GTX 1650, literally the full CUDA cores, but cut down to 64-bit to save on space and power. And again, this thing's clocked so low, I don't think it needs a 128-bit bus. It should perform just above a GTX 1050 and therefore seemingly be positioned near Rembrandt performance. So I don't know. This came out about a month ago. This is finally we're covering it in a news segment. What were your thoughts when you saw? Yeah, what were your initial thoughts when you saw they were launching something called an RTX 2050? Because I think that's what caught a lot of people off guard. First of all,
Well, I think the reaction from everyone at first is kind of confusion, especially when you add in the fact that it is an Ampere card. It's not like a some old die that they're rebranding now. This is GA107. I mean, I think the video you put out about it, I think made a good case for they're trying to separate the branding of these very low-end cards from their higher-end line, which
their newest line is their quote unquote high end line, and they call the 3050 their mid range, even though let's be honest, it's their low.
It's entry level.
But they want you to see the 3090 as a above enthusiast tier, and the 3080 as enthusiast, and the 3070 as high end, even though it's really mid range, and then and so on and so forth. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the conventional thing that you would have done is call it the 3040 or whatever they want to call it, or even again go to the weird 2600 branding again if they wanted to. But I guess their reasoning for that was that those were the cards that didn't have ray tracing. So this has ray tracing, so it needs to be given a ray tracing name. So they went with the 2050 because the name was. As far as I can tell, because the name was available, and they're like, "I'll call it that."
I honestly think that's what it is. I mean, what's the alternatives? GTX 1700 series? That doesn't really work because it has the RTX features. And then what do you call it? A 2550 if it's in between the 2000 and 3000 series? That also doesn't really make sense. It just sounds weird. So I think that's it. I think this is their way of having a sub latest gen but kind of next gen card.
Although I do think it's kind of interesting because it's just cut down. There aren't any features of it cut out like there were with the 1600 series. So it has all of the bells and whistles that Ampere generally has, I guess, except it has a 64-bit bus, which is I guess what they've decided is the cutoff for we can't brand this as an Ampere card, even though it is an Ampere card.
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to look at this and see, like, from my memory, if I'm remembering correctly, the MX570, 2050, and I think, what is it, the 3050 laptop? Let me go to Notebook Check and check this quick. Isn't that the same?
Yeah.
They're all the same CUDA core count.
Yeah.
And people would go, so why are all these out there? And it's like, well, guys, they don't need to cut it down more. Their yields are fine. So they have 3 cards with the same CUDA core count, and they're cutting down the bus literally based on TDP. It will be clocked that much lower. It doesn't need more bandwidth. A smaller bus takes up less space due to how many memory chips are around it in the laptop. I guess that's just how they're going to do it. And yeah, I mean, I think the 2050 will be better than the 1650 Max Q. We'll get to this later in the episode. I don't think it's going to cut it, though, frankly. I think the 2050 has a little bit of arrogance there, and it should have just been the MX570. I just don't see this competing very well with Rembrandt and Navi 24, especially now that we know, as we're about to cover, Navi 24 is 6 nanometer.
I mean, we'll see. Looking at it, it's occupying a very, very well. I guess because it has 4 gigs of RAM, which the 570 doesn't. MX570 doesn't have. Which
doesn't typically, but it can. I think. I think there are 4 gigabyte options.
That was my big criticism of the MX570, especially. I would like to see those, at least the top end of their MX line, move to 4 gigabytes at some point, because was the 152 gigabytes still, or was that 1 gigabyte back then?
It was 2.
So that's been what, 3 years now, and they're still on 2 gigabytes. It would be nice.
4 years.
Okay. It would be nice if they remained, if they moved to 4 gigabytes, but then the 2050 wouldn't have space to exist, because at the end of the day, the only thing it really has above the MX570 is slightly higher clocks and more RAM, which the more RAM is what convinces somebody that's buying this for gaming to get it, because a 4 gigabyte card is just enough to cut it still with 1080p, I think, and 2 gigabytes really isn't.
Right. And one key thing, and a lot of this did come from talking to sources about it. Like, this is where I got some of the information on just why it's named so weirdly. But another key aspect to this was this semi-leak opinion piece video I did, which all of the videos we do now are basically semi-leaks, honestly, was that the fact that they're giving the full CUDA core count to the MX550 just tells me the 1650 is going bye-bye. Like, there's no place for it in the market anymore. I don't know why they would be giving the full CUDA core count to the MX550, and I see a lot of this also as in the background of a lot of OEMs telling me they just don't want to use the 3050 anymore compared to ARC 128 and Navi 24. They just like those cards more. And so it's like, yeah, I think they're realizing that they need to reposition that die for uses in other places because it's not going to be used, for what it was originally released for anymore.
Yeah, and with that in mind, it kind of just sounds like with these three cards, they're almost just scrambling to put something on the market that they hope can compete with those new cards from Intel and AMD that are coming out then. Right.
And it's not the only cards they're scrambling to release.
Ooh.
If we move on to story number 2, NVIDIA RTX 3050 8GB desktop, 3090 Ti desktop, 3070 Ti laptop, and 3080 Ti laptop cards revealed. Today, NVIDIA revealed a flurry of new cards for both laptop and desktop. And while the platforms and sizes greatly differ between the products, the story they tell is succinct. NVIDIA is making more cards that use more power and diverting their lowest end die to desktop. All of this, at least in our opinion at Moore's Law is Dead, clearly is a refocusing of their assets towards what they can still compete with technologically in early 2022. Ampere's bad efficiency, which everyone listening must remember is still based on an 8-nanometer node, while Intel and AMD moved to 6-nanometer, is finally catching up with them. Before explaining, though, more, let's summarize the cards themselves. First, the RTX 3090 Ti is an overclocked full GA102 die. It will be 6 to 9% stronger than the 3090, and it will use 29% more energy to get there. The 3080 Ti laptop, then, is seemingly the second GA103 product to be announced after the A4500. Although I must be clear, I cannot personally 100% confirm this is GA103 just yet from multiple sources. But it is a 16 gigabyte, 175 watt laptop card with below the amount of CUDA cores as a 3080. And so, I don't know. It seems like it should outperform the RTX 3070 desktop and 3080 laptop by, I don't know, 5 to 15%, depending on the TDP it's given. Then finally, the 3070 Ti laptop is an almost 3080 laptop. That's really all there is to say about it. Finally, RTX 3050 desktop is just a 3050 Ti laptop card, given a 130 watt TDP. It is a bit lower clocked than I expected, or at least something is lower in the teraflops. I thought it'd be like 30% less teraflops based on my math. They could have gone there and given it, but it looks like it's 9. So that's compared to the desktop 3060, people would be good to realize it's like 30% or more lower teraflops. So this is not going to be close to the 3060, guys. Anyways, can you see what's happening here? NVIDIA is making sure it holds on to both high-end desktop and laptop performance while launching a low-end desktop card around Navi 24 and A380s. That's the 128 execution unit ARC cards launch. All right, Dan, you saw all of this here. We knew these were coming pretty much. It was a little different than we expected, I think. I still don't see the 3080 12 gigabyte announced, but God knows they can choose to launch whatever, whenever. I mean, what do you think?
I forgot about that card.
There's so many different configurations they're testing, though. You never know for sure. But what did you think about these? I mean, 3050 desktop, 3090 Ti, 3070 and 3080 Ti laptop.
I mean, I think the 3050 desktop or whatever the 3050 Ti laptop being brought to desktop was inevitable. At a certain point, you kind of have to try to compete in the low end, because if you want people to continue buying your stuff, you have to serve the low end. And I mean, I guess the low end is $250, but it's getting to be a more expensive.
Well, they've done it right.
Again.
How long have we been saying on Broken Silicon? NVIDIA's goal is to get the 50 class to 250.
Yeah, I know. And they did it We'll see if it's justified at $250, although that doesn't matter because it will probably sell for $330 to $400, knowing the current market. But, I think they had to release it, especially with the 65. Well, now both of their competitors competing at the low end, unless Nvidia just wants to give up that performance tier completely to Intel and AMD. And then the 3090 Ti, it's a bit confusing why they feel the need for this to exist, because I think you can still make a decent case that the 3090 is the performance king. It's mostly trades blows with the 6900 XT, but it has better ray tracing performance, so maybe they can hang on to that crown. And I just feel like pushing this card that is gonna use like 500 watts is ridiculous, and I don't really see a reason for its existence aside from the fact that they can sell it for what's our guess now, $2,300. Like, they can sell this for whatever they want to, because this isn't for someone that's looking to spend a smart amount of money on a computer.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to pricing, there's an argument they could just slot it in where it was before, but I don't think they will. I think this is often a way for them to raise prices. People forget that a lot of people like the 3060 Super, but it was their excuse to make the 60 class 400.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know. I think it's probably likely to be $2,000. I don't know why it wouldn't be in this one.
Yeah, I mean, 2,300 I think was a bit hyperbolic. I think there's a slight possibility that they would just go for that, but you're probably right that 2,000 is the most likely number they go for.
I could see 1,700 though, and again, I wouldn't rule out if it is just 1,500, but as of now, they're still selling 3090s on Amazon for $3,000 or more, so I don't see why they would go for lower than $2,000.
Yeah.
I think it will command that price, and at least for a bit. And if they need to do a price drop later, I guess they can. Although none of these people like doing that anymore. I guess the other thing I would say then is I do want to bring up the RTX 3050 because I've noticed this like bizarre debates going on in my Discord where people seem to be under the impression this thing is powerful. They didn't, and we'll get to the 6500 XT next, but let me just level set everyone's expectations here. I was kind of wondering if they'd give it faster GDDR6, if they would clock it as fast as they can, maybe give it a 140 watt TDP, like maybe just a hair under 150. That doesn't seem to be what they've done here. It has, what is this, 38% lower bandwidth than the 3060? Mm-hmm. And I think 30% or more, without looking it up, less teraflops than the 3060 guys. This is something that will be like 20% weaker than a 2060. This will be probably weaker than a 1660 Ti, if not at best close to that. I believe video cards even leaked a month ago that it's around a 1660 Super or maybe slightly stronger. So this is not something that really does anything but raise the price of the 1660 Ti while using, well, about the same amount of energy as the 1660 Ti. I guess 1660 Super, not 1660 Ti or something. It's just an 8 gigabyte version of that. And, I honestly, there's a lot of evidence they expect this to be heavily marked up and sold to miners too, just so everyone knows. I've heard some dumb things about Navi 24 too, but we'll save that for when we get to it.
That 8 gigabytes, it kind of makes it the weakest new card that you could really use for Ethereum mining. So yeah, I'm sure some miners will be into the 3050. And as far as the comparison to the 1660 Super, I really hope your calculation is off, even though I don't think it is. We can't say until there are benchmarks out. If that's off, all they really did is increase the performance tier. Same performance from 2 years ago, and are selling it at a slightly higher price now for, I guess, a little bit more RAM.
It depends.
I guess a little bit. Yeah, and I guess you get a little bit more RAM this time. although this is a 1080p card, it's going to be a 1080p card, and that extra RAM, I do wonder how much use you get out of the extra 2 gigabytes over the 1660 at 1080p. Maybe it'll be a little better at 1440p or something for people that are playing like 1440p 60 FPS, I guess, because you could probably get that to work fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. You know, I did a 3060 review, and I was not impressed. You know, I felt that level of performance. It wasn't really a 1440p card for me. There were multiple games where, again, you know, going back to that review, I really did expect the 3070 to feel stronger, but not crazy stronger. And there were some games where I found areas where I was getting like 60% higher performance with the 3070 over the 3060. And I was like, this doesn't need 12 gigabytes. This thing sucks.
Well, Tom,
this is for creators or it's mining. This really isn't going to use the 12 gigabytes at all.
I mean, I think you and I can both agree that Ampere is the most strangely paired and segmented line of cards I think I've ever seen since I've been into PC gaming. Like, I've never seen a line of GPUs just pair seemingly random amounts of RAM to all their cards, because that's like, when you're looking at it, I understand why each thing the product has the amount of RAM it has. But if you're just looking at it from the outside perspective, it's like, what the hell is going on with this line of GPUs?
Yeah. Well, I guess let's table that a little bit until the next story. What did you think of the 3080 Ti laptop? I mean, I am under the impression this is a GA103 die with part of its bus disabled.
It's, once again, you know, not actually a 3080 Ti, and they're calling it the same thing, which is annoying. But I guess it has 16 gigabytes of RAM. So for somebody that wants a true desktop replacement, this is like the strongest thing you can get right now. And that's the market it's meant to serve.
Yeah. Well, let me move on to this reader mail here. Harry writes in, "Hey, Tom and Dan, or guest, it's Dan. Watching some content on the RTX 3050, I realized that I have no idea how much ray tracing and DLSS scales to the amount of RT and tensor cores that are there. As the amount of RT or tensor cores is mostly related to the general performance of the RTX cards, how much do they actually matter? How many tensor cores are needed for DLSS? Is there a difference in DLSS performance uplift between lower and higher tier GPUs? I feel all thrown back to the discussions of the Adore TV Discord and YouTube channel about the waste of die space for cores and for gamers are actually quite useless. Like, is space wasted on the 3090 because for good DLSS, you need only half of the cores that are provided, as the 3050 might give some DLSS uplift as the 3090 does? I think we've just seen pretty consistently that per SM that's how much better ray tracing. And as you go up the Ampere product stack, there seems to be a slight advantage per SM over time that increases as you increase SMs. But I feel like that's mostly just underutilizing the SMs for raster performance, right? If you look at a lot of NVIDIA's bragging about like performance uplift and ray tracing for Ampere, I think they said it's like 70% better than Turing. And it's like, okay, but you you doubled the teraflops or over So in other words, you brought 50%, maybe 55 to 60% more raster performance and 70% more ray tracing, but the amount of teraflops you added is way more than that. Really, you're just not utilizing the teraflops for raster as efficiently, at least if you want to talk about the concept of teraflop efficiency for gaming, which really it's like, it doesn't matter. What matters is performance, die size, and cost. That's all that matters.
It was kind of coupled between them for a couple years, so I think some people decided that was the norm, even though it's not the norm. That was just a coincidence.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I've tested quite a few Ampere cards. You know, the 3080 Ti, 3070, 3060. It's not Ampere, but I have a 2060. I've tested the A6000, the A4000 as well. I've just never released those benchmarks. I just can't find the time to put it into something right now. But I have tested the A4000. I have the pictures and benchmarks all done, people. at the end of the day, I expected the A6000 to maybe get like a 5% efficiency boost in ray tracing with the DLSS over the 3080 Ti I tested, because I was like, well, it has more cores, and so let's just see if this, but it didn't, it didn't. It seems pretty consistent that whatever your gaming performance is, it's what your ray tracing difference is going to be as well. So just look at the number, whatever the difference is in raster between the cards, that's probably going to be the difference in ray tracing. And they just kind of balance it with that in mind. I don't know what else to really say to that I just wouldn't think about it like how many ray tracing, or cores do you need? How many tensor cores do you need? Because the way Ampere works, it's just per SM, pretty much like RDNA 2 to a certain extent. It's all, there's a ratio going on. And again, there are professional cards where they've like left more tensor cores enabled. And I know there's the KO cards that are like, what was it? Like they had I think a disabled 2080 that they were selling as a 2060, but that's rare. And so, yeah, that gave you more ray tracing performance, relatively speaking, but it didn't like double it because you had twice as much more.
Yeah, and the conversation doesn't really become that much more complicated unless something happens where with their subsequent lines, ray tracing stops scaling, or if ray tracing stops scaling as efficient or scaling equally efficiently to SM count, which that's not the case for the cards we have right now. So whatever.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying, though, is I guess there are those cards like the 2060 KO that have more tensor cores and get boosts, but it's not like whatever NVIDIA's done, they think that's the balance, and I don't think it's as simple as double the tensor cores, double the whatever. It's like, there's definitely more and more diminishing returns at a certain point. And what they're balancing is what they think is the perfect balance to not lose raster against AMD and try to win in ray tracing still. Bfish36 writes in, I'm still confused about NVIDIA's mobile lineup for 2022. Have you heard anything about the regular 3060 and 3070? NVIDIA trying to drive up average sales price with the TI models is totally on brand, but they can't just ignore the biggest segment of the market, can they? Well, AMD's lineup is interesting. We've seen they can't be relied on to supply the lion's share of the market. Can you please clarify what you see happening in the mid-tier mobile market in 2022? After the recent announcements, I'm left with more questions than answers. I think you kind of asked this question a month ago, Bfish. But you did, but I am noticing here that the last couple sentences, are you saying basically I'm still confused? I mean, look, here's my answer. Can they ignore the middle? No, but the 3060 is honestly fine. They'll just sell it for less in laptops if they need to. And your answer for what's going to happen is Intel's going to take a lot of mid-range and low-end laptop market share. I think they are.
I guess I can't say if this was intentional, but it's fortuitous for them that is the segments of the market they're targeting for Intel. And, this is the best. I think Intel has a really good entry point into the market at what they're targeting, because frankly, especially like if on the lower end stuff too, like Intel might be the only people serving a certain segment of the market when they release their cards.
3080 Ti Sellerman writes in, hello, Tom and Dan. Are you both excited for another RX 580, but now with half the VRAM? I don't know. Let's start talking about it, though. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. For 2022, give yourself the gift of an easy-to-make-at-home meal that's healthy, reasonably priced, and above all else, actually tasty, so that you actually do eat a healthy meal. I eat it all the time, and it really tastes fantastic. It's so easy to either eat a packet by itself as a lunch, or you can put a couple of eggs in there while it's boiling, and well, you can then have a hearty meal at the end of the day. Click the link in the description and use the offer code BrokenSilicon to save 10% off a special bundle just for Moore's Law Z fans that includes spoon, chopsticks, and more. This is a great deal for you, and it really does help the channel tremendously. Seriously, I eat it. It's good. They've been supporting Moore's Law Z for months, and you buying their product supports me. And you know what? You really should try to if you want a healthy and tasty snack to start out this year and maybe get rid of some of that holiday weight. Buy Vite Ramen today. Story number 3, AMD RX 6500 XT revealed. So yeah, AMD unveiled the 3050 desktop competitor finally, and it's on 6 nanometer. It has a 64-bit bus, 16 megabytes of infinity cache, and it is clocked above 2.8 gigahertz with 18 gigabit per second memory. This truly should perform between a GTX 1650 Super and 1660 or higher than them both if you're below 1080p. It's basically a 4 gigabyte RX 590 that uses less than half the energy, or I guess another way to put it, it's a 4 gigabyte 5500 XT that costs more, but I guess uses less energy and has ray tracing capabilities. So it's not the best thing. It's not what we all wished for at $200, but AMD was considering pricing this at $250, just so everybody knows, according to my sources. So they definitely were a little more, and I don't know if this is the right word, but it's the word I can't find the other one. This is a little more generous than they were considering doing otherwise. Oh, and I do feel like people are consistently missing the point that 4 gigabytes may actually stop miners from buying this card and keep it closer to MSRP. What do you think of it?
Well, that last point is important to emphasize because, like, the Ethereum's mining algorithm essentially
It's above it now, yeah.
Yeah, the algorithm changes. I don't remember when the changes are scheduled to happen with Ethereum, but it progressively uses more RAM over time, and now 4 gigabytes of RAM is it completely unusable for mining Ethereum, or is it just really inefficient?
I think we're at like a point where like 4.5 wouldn't be enough either. Not that I know of any 4.5 gigabyte cards, unless actually a leak I saw about ARC 128. There was some weird configurations I saw recently, so who knows? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I have to say this about every RDNA 2 launch after the original ones. This is a good product. It costs more than it would otherwise.
You can make the same criticism for everything, and it's fair to say that it costs too much, because it does. I would prefer to see this at like, I don't know,
120. I mean, if we're really going back to the normal days, I guess if you count for inflation, maybe 150.
I was going to say like 170 would be nice, but
yeah, I was hoping for 180 or 190.
You know, to actually see like progression in price performance, because especially at the low end, that's just not happening anymore. And like even in their press conference today, talking about the 6500 XT, they were kind of like, at least this is what it came up to me like. They were like, we've noticed that 1080p gamers like this level of performance, so here it is again.
I didn't catch on to that. Is it? We've noticed this is the perfect amount. That's why we're charging more for it.
I mean, they did say it used more. I mean, performed better against the cards it was competing with. I mean, like I believe it was the 1660 or something like that, and the 580. But yeah, it is what it is. 4 gigabytes isn't a ton of RAM, especially at $200 or $199 in 2022. But hopefully it's enough for 1080p for the most part, you know?
I mean, it's certainly going to be enough for 1080p 60. I mean, I think clearly it will be. And I still don't think people understand how much a high clock speed helps the lower the res you get to. This thing's not going to do 1440p, or if it does, in some games, they must be pretty goddamn old. But it will do 1080p 60. You know, at medium settings, I expect this to be a pretty decent 144 hertz gaming card, especially if you add FSR, which I don't call AAA gaming like AMD does for some reason. But that was the thing that annoyed me in this presentation multiple times, is AMD like saying 1080p FSR AAA game. I'm like, okay, look, using this down sampling, this is not AAA gaming. But, you know, I don't know what else to say. You know, it is what it is. And when we compare it to the 3050, which now we fully can, now that we're at this part of the episode.
I do want to make an amendment. They were comparing it to the 570 in 1650.
Right, but how much did it outperform the 570?
That outperformed the 570. Their graphs are really confusing, but it looks like it outperformed the 570 by somewhere between 20 and 60% depending on the game.
Which I think you guys got to understand, there will just be games where it's hilariously faster. Like, because of how high the clock speeds are, and like the fact that games are really utilizing RDNA 2 well right now. So what? He said between 20 and 60% more than a 570. Yeah, so it's pretty much a 590 below 1080p. And depending on the game, it will be a 580, a 590. It's just going to be a little all over the place because it is truly an MX card killer that's been pushed up into a 3050 class.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
This was meant to be, this was meant to be like a 25 watt GPU. And they announced it will be. They're going to use Navi 24 for that class of performance. It's just, they just see such an opening and so much demand. They're like, well, if we can make 2 of these almost for every 6600 XT we make, then I guess let's just flog the crap out of it and make a ton of them, because this is the level of performance that I would say is the minimum to game okay.
Yeah, and I do think it's, I will say hopefully with the addition of, what is their driver implementation of FSR called again?
I think it's RSR.
RSR, okay.
Which I didn't put on here, but worth mentioning.
Hopefully that will give some better level of performance across the board and uplift the tier of performance this card would be in without FSR and RSR. But you also do have to add in the fact that if you're gaming at 1080p, what's the input image for FSR at 1080p? It's like
it's probably 720p or 640. I don't honestly remember, but low would be the word you use. Yeah,
it's very low, and every review I've seen of FSR has said that it does begin to really take a toll. So, hopefully with that, there's some level of performance they get out of it. But I think at 1080p especially, you do have to caveat how good FSR is.
Yeah, and again, with regards to how I would compare this to the 3050, really, I think it's no different than comparing Navi 23 to the 3060. The RX 6600 XT, Navi 23, has a die a little smaller than the 5700 XT, but it's a more mature node. That was always meant to actually be the successor to the 5500 XT. But again, they pushed it hard because the market says they can get away with it. They were going to have the 6700 at $400 with 12 gigabytes and a cut down Navi 22, of course. And then they were going to have the 6600 XT probably be like $300 with 8 gigabytes, but they can get away with making it sell for more with a higher naming or whatever. So that's what they're doing. Yeah. And at the same time, though, if you go to Newegg right now, the 3060 is $800 or more. If you go to the 6600 XT is $600. And I know that doesn't sound great, but I expect it to be this difference to be double kind of what's about to happen here at the Navi 24, because it has 4 gigabytes of RAM. Miners, there's one for under 600 here. Yeah, so, and I've seen them for 500 regularly. Like, I know people are like, well, the 3060, and it probably will. It'll probably be like 10 to 20% stronger than Navi 24. And this comes from AIBs telling me it's neck and neck, guys. I'm telling you what they're telling me. There's a lot of people saying there's no way 16 compute units can perform this way. Well, whatever it is. So go make your own channel and tell everyone that all AIBs don't know what they're talking about, I guess. But that's roughly where this is performing. And they've actually known about these cards for a long time, like a very long time, actually. So with the fact that less miners can buy it, the 3060 is typically selling for 50% more than a 6600 XT. I'm saying I think the 3050 in reality is going to be a $400 to $500 card. And there will be $250 or less, $200 6500 XTs you can actually buy. So they're not a different class of performance. One just has more RAM and will sell for probably twice as much on the market.
And I think that's what really, when talking about the 3050 and the 6500 XT, I don't think it's easy to say which one you would recommend you would buy right now, because you need to see benchmarks and what the street price will be. And you're probably right that the 3050 will be more inflated over MSRP than the 6500 XT. Especially with, hopefully the fact that the 6500 XT is on its own node and it's tiny, they'll be able to flood the market with 6500 XTs. And that's only if they see that there's the demand for a bunch of 6500 XTs, which I'm really not... I'm not sure what the demand for it is, because I feel like most people want something stronger than a 6500 XT, because most people that are thinking of upgrading probably have something that's a little bit weaker than a 6500 XT.
Mm-hmm. Let's be very clear about what we're saying. I don't love the overall product. I think it's an interesting die, though.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate with the prices. I would not recommend this to people who have a 480 unless it's breaking. But if it is even relatively close to $200 on the street every now and then, at least there's an option outside of what, $350 1650s? I mean, this is better than the alternative, and it just still sucks. But notice that usually AMD likes having like a 25% pricing difference between all of their tiers of cards. And this one's actually... what is it then? One, two,
it's almost half, isn't it?
Maybe 30, 40% less than. So they do suspect shortages will actually start to get better by the middle of this year. I think it's obvious AMD expects that, or at least they're accounting for that possibly happening.
Yeah.
Evil Steve Software Box writes in, "Hi, Tom and guest. It's Dan. If the ARC 6500 XT's TDP is 75 watts, well, it's 107, I guess. That makes it seem like it performs rather poorly when compared to what you have told us about Intel Arc SoC 2. Well, I expect SoC 2 to perform... it depends, right? On desktop, I expect it to perform a bit above a 1650 Super, maybe, and then on laptop, well, it'd be, probably around 1650 Ti laptop or better while using less energy. So I don't know that it performs poorly. It's actually probably pretty similar with the ARC card having an advantage at 1080p with more settings turned up. That's probably how I would describe it. And actually, I just feel I need one more time to make it clear here, like when people are doubting how it will perform. Okay, guys, it has 16 compute units. The 6600 is 28. The 6600 typically runs at about 2.1 gigahertz. This is clocked...
Boost to 2.8. Yeah,
yeah. The 6600 boosts way lower than the 6600 XT. And that's about a 5700 in performance. Guys, this is 16 compute units clocked, but they're clocked almost 40% faster than the 6600.
Faster, exactly.
Yeah. So if you add 33%, if only I had a calculator in front of me at all times, which I do. See, 16 times 1.33. This is the equivalent of if it was at the same clock speeds, 21 compute units. And then it also is using 18 gigabit per second memory. And we all have to remember that Infinity Cache basically somewhat makes it so you just don't need nearly as much bandwidth unless you're at a too high resolution for the Infinity Cache, which I think 1080p will be okay-ish. So there's no way around it. I think this is probably going to be about 30% weaker than a 6600, which is a 5700. Okay. Well, the 3050, as I've covered, is probably going to be about 20% weaker than a 5700 as well, or a little more than that. I think the 3050 will be stronger, but anyone thinking the 3050 is going to be like 40% better, it won't be. It's going to practically be in the same tier while having a fake MSRP that's 25% higher, using more energy, and a street price probably twice as much.
Yeah.
So table it, guys, in the Discord. Anyways, but, we'll see. It's just, again, 9 teraflops. It's a little low for what I could have been for the 3050. All right. Let us move on then to story number 4. AMD Rembrandt detailed. Today, AMD revealed their much rumored and discussed for months, or was it years at this point, Rembrandt APU. In summary, Rembrandt is an APU that is based on TSMC's 6nm process, utilizes a new Zen 3 Plus core architecture, offering 30% more performance in certain scenarios compared to Cezanne's 7nm Zen 3 8-core CPU. Includes 12 compute units of RDNA 2 that doubles Vega 8's performance in at least some scenarios AMD showed, and likely beats the GTX 1050 Ti laptop card and possibly, probably the MX 550 in performance. Now, we need to wait for third-party testing, but overall, it does seem like Rembrandt's big advantage isn't so much that it will beat Alder Lake Mobile in CPU performance, but that it will be competitive at power and idling in many scenarios. And that's something that I've also seen debated by people, is I don't think people are understanding that, yes, if you have a laptop that's using all of the compute units, it uses more power than, well, it's, it can use like easily 30 watts or so, but at idle, it is supposedly going to have the same or longer battery life than Cezanne, which is already very impressive. And that I feel like this thing, at least what I'm also told from inside sources at AMD, that people are really, really underestimating what the real world power consumption will be.
I mean, my big takeaway from that, from their Rembrandt's portion of it, is it does seem like they're pretty confident about how powerful it will be for the as a low end gaming device. So it does seem to me like the 12 compute units are a major deal. I mean, the 12 compute units, that is that's a 6400, which is the lowest end card they're releasing.
Yeah, and I guess I'm trying to think of I think I have to clarify too my statements of I don't think it's about the performance. I mean, what are we I mean, it's 30% higher performance than a CPU from the previous year. That's standard now, guys. And the GPU doubles Cezanne's graphics. Okay, well, that's still Vega 8, which Renoir had in, 2019, 2020? 2020, I guess. That's not that big of a deal to me. This is still a 200 millimeter squared APU. The original Zen 1 APUs, I think, were 217, 240, is around there, 230, somewhere around there, millimeter squared. They could make this bigger. They could give it 16 compute units. They could probably give it a little bit of infinity cache. There's a lot they could do and fit it in there still. This isn't any more in GPU performance than what we should expect out of something that's launching, 2 years after Renoir's Vega 8, that already was a kind of anemic GPU for the die size.
That's really true. Their Renoir stuff was really best when paired with a discrete graphics card. And I think the need for a discrete graphics card is lessened, at least with this. So I think you can have a reasonably good, thin and light laptop with just Rembrandt in it, and not paired with what I have, a 1650.
Right, and now maybe you can play 1080p low at 60 frames instead of having to drop it to 900p low or something with but with Cezanne. But, I guess actually I have to say this too. I think a lot of my opinion comes from the fact of is this not what we should expect by now?
I think a good way to put what you're saying is, it's not that this isn't a reasonable upgrade from Renoir, but it's
something that doesn't kind of bring a new capability to a standard laptop without a graphics card.
Right. So I should say Cezanne, but it's not like this isn't a good uplift in performance. It's just that it's kind of what we should expect, especially I think the GPU performance, I guess you could say, it's just the reason there's such a big uplift is because they haven't really been uplifting its performance for
shit with their integrated graphics for years, in my opinion.
I mean, when did they introduce Vega 8? It's been a while.
After Vega 11.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Which it's I know it outperformed Vega 11, but it also was 7 nanometer from 12. So
yeah, that's true. So I think what you can say is, and actually I guess we'll see with Alder Lake Mobile how it compares, but I think Rembrandt is good. It's just it's 30% increase in performance, which is good, and you need to erase the years in your mind of 11% IPC increases, and the RDNA 2 12 compute units is great. It's great that we have 12 RDNA compute units on an APU now, but you kind of would have thought RDNA would have came to the APUs maybe a year sooner, ideally.
Yeah, like if they had like an 8 compute unit APU meant for like lower end laptops and handheld things that was supposed to come out.
If only that existed.
Yeah, if only Van Gogh actually came out when it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so the last thing I want to say about it then is I saw some people in the comments like, or I saw one person, I don't know, say, oh, that was unfair that you brought up that the consoles launched in 2020 and they don't need FSR to game below 60 frames and 1080p low. And I'm like, yeah, my point isn't that I understand why they use, why I understand they're bigger APUs. That's not my point. My point simply is a $400 PS4 diskless games and plenty of games around 1800p 60 and doesn't need FSR. So to say this is a AAA gaming APU when a $400 console is quadrupling its performance or more, I don't give a shit.
And it's like we have
$400 console that's almost 2 years old, guys. This isn't magic APU. It's impressive. It's an impressive APU, but it is not a AAA gaming APU. It is still not the AAA gaming APU I thought we would have by now.
It's entry level. I guess if you want to say you can barely play AAA games, I guess you can argue that that's a AAA gaming APU. But I do think there is a point to be made, like you said, where, listen, APUs by AMD exist that have 52 compute units on them and 36 compute units. Like, I don't think that would go into a thin and light laptop, but they exist, and it's not some impossible thing to make an SoC that has more than barely enough compute units to game at 1080p.
Yeah, and I think what this would really have best been served in is if they could have got it on a desktop platform, because, hey, look, if the 6500 XT can hit 2.8 gigahertz stock, I wouldn't doubt that a desktop variant of this at 100 watts could hit like really, really high clock speeds. And yeah, I mean, maybe with good DDR5 on desktop, this could get you something pretty closer to a 6400 XT, and then at least you have something to use during the shortage. The problem is it uses DDR5, though. This is going to be an AM5 APU, I think. That's going to be eventually relegated to below the, whatever they're going to call it, probably 7600 XT, probably. I think they're going to use 6000 for just Rembrandt, just like they did with Renoir. But so, and by then the shortages will probably be a bit better. So, and God knows if they'll even bring it to that. They might just put Van Gogh there instead as their low-end APU on desktop. So, I don't know. It's good. And I think that it's going to continue to gain AMD market share because, frankly, they can only go up right now. But I don't see it as magical yet. But we need to wait for reviews. So I have a suspicion that the battery lives with these are going to be really, really good.
Well, certainly from their keynote, you would think that they're bullish on the battery life because they were advertising up to 24 hours, and I know it's their marketing speak, but
they tend to be pretty straight shooters, though. And guys, I know there's people like, oh, but in one of their benchmarks, like the APU went to 28 watts, whereas the CES one went to 15. Sure, in an APU test playing games, but I think when it comes to like real world power usage, I think it's going to be substantially longer battery lives than Cezanne, most likely.
Yeah.
Anyways, let us move on to another CPU announcement. Story number 5. AMD announces only the R7 5800X3D and shows off a 5 GHz Zen 4. Today, AMD announced the R7 5800X3D. Honestly, there really isn't anything to say about performance, in our opinion, that AMD didn't already confirm half a year ago. Zen 3D is 15% better than Zen 3. No, the only thing you could arguably say was a surprise about it is that it was the only Vcache CPU announced for AM4, and it's not coming till spring. In fact, the only other desktop Ryzen chip shown was a Zen 4 CPU running all cores at 5 gigahertz, which is exciting, but again, arguably a tad disappointing. To show off, at least in my opinion, Dan, to show off a new flagship coming out at the end of the year next to another gaming CPU that isn't out yet, directly suggests that AMD is choosing to not release the top-end Vcache models with 16 cores, and that they're basically telling people, if all you do is game, this is coming out. Otherwise, wait for Zen 4. Don't buy Alder Lake. Wait for Zen 4 is the messaging I got. Which, SNES Chalmers writes in, Happy New Year, Tom and Dan. Did the lack of the 5900 X3D and 5950 X3D in the later in spring 2022 things about the 5800 X3D release date catch you by surprise like it did for me? Might we see additional SKUs as launch nears, or is the 5800 X3D just enough to fulfill the commitment to investors? To me, it seems to be too little too late to ship meaningful volumes, especially when Zen 4 was teased immediately after. Yep, probably less than half a year after it, boosting above 5 gigahertz all-core and coming a few months later. The spring 2022 is the part that really surprised me.
Yeah, that is
I thought
late.
it'd come out in February.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like spring is very late. I was expecting, Q1. I think everyone was expecting Q1. And to me, this just screams trying to prevent gamers from switching to Alder Lake in the meantime if they're thinking of buying a CPU right now. And maybe their thought is it's better served. They can make 5800 X3Ds with one CCD and make a lot more of those to sell to gamers as opposed to putting those in a 5950 X3D for a segment that's going to be served again within 6 months with the 4950X or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah, which, at the end of the day, actually, they're really, you can't even really say they're more efficient than Alder Lake overall. It depends on the benchmark you're doing.
Yeah.
But what they're going to do is launch a CPU that should roughly tie the, shall we say, mid-range best gaming Alder Lake CPUs. And that's all they feel they need. They have a 16-core. And they want to send as many of their Vcache dies to Milan X as they can, which has an insane advantage over Intel server chips right now, and might be one of the last years where they have that. It's just so important that they capture as much Epic market share as they can, because once you entrench server market share, it tends to not go away, whereas consumers get whatever the hell they want constantly. That's why AMD's doing this. It really doesn't surprise me at all. And again, I guess just to directly answer SNES Chalmers' question here, did the lack of the 5900 X3D and 5950 X3D surprise me? No, especially when I saw the name. The second I saw that name, I'm like, I don't think they're going to show another one, because they call it the 6000 series if they were going to. And then spring, then they show Zen 4. They're not going to show their new flagship if they want you to buy this one. I always thought this was an option, that it could be a limited release. I never claimed to know they were going to do a full lineup. I was just hoping they would. But it's funny, now that I think about it, we're in January. I haven't gotten any leaks about it. Anytime, just like Threadripper, just like Zen 3 Threadripper. It's like at a certain point it was October, and I'm like, why don't my sources know anything? This isn't coming out.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad point at this point. You're right. They're not going to show Zen 4, then go back and show Zen 3D. That would show Zen 3D again. That would
show
make no
comparable,
sense.
16 core. Yeah.
Yeah. And the takeaway that they're trying to show with the 5800 X3D is, look, it's beating the 12900K in a bunch of games. You don't need to switch to Alder Lake.
They only compared it to the 5900X from what I saw. Are there slides you saw?
There's slides comparing it to the 12900K. The
12. Well, I didn't. Somehow I missed that. Again, guys, I'm running on fumes today. We just got back from break. What did it overall perform like compared to it? It's just comparable.
Slightly. So they showed CS:GO. It performed slightly worse. They showed Gears of War 5 was a tie, and then what are the other games? They show Final Fantasy 14, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Far Cry 6, and Watch Dogs Legions all had really meager performance. Well, aside from Final Fantasy 14, which was 17% better than the 12900K. The other three games were modest single-digit improvements over the 12900K.
Which I guess I'm actually going to skip over a few reader mails and then come back to them. Story number 6. Intel announces Alder Lake Mobile i9-12900KS and kinda ARC. I want to get to just one part of the story here then, Dan. Like, consider this. Intel announced the i9-12900KS. It was something that was rumored for, I think, over a month already. 5.2 gigahertz all-core, 5.5 gigahertz boost, and a huge TDP, of course. So, I mean, like, what's the point in AMD releasing the 5950X? It's not going to beat the 12900KS in gaming.
No, it's not.
Or multi-threading.
Like, that's what I'm saying. I think the thought they're having is this is for gaming, and there's no reason to release a way more expensive CPU that the 5950X 3D would be versus the 5800X 3D, which that is a long name.
Yeah, I think it looks good on paper, but now that we're starting to say it a lot, I regret thinking that's what they should name it.
Yeah.
I guess, and it just occurs to me, people need to remember this. There was no 2800X. There was only the 2700X.
Mm-hmm.
And the Threadrippers of the time did boost like 5% higher. And I've always heard about golden samples that were a little higher than those if they really wanted to go for it. AMD chose to not launch a 2800X because they're like, why? It still won't beat the 9900K, and now we lose our efficiency advantage to try to keep up with it. So what's the point? It's a similar situation here. They're not going to beat Alder Lake in gaming, guys. I think it's time to face facts. And they realized it, and they'd rather send those volumes to server. And you know what? Actually, it occurs to me too. This also would make it easier to make Zen 4 look like a big uplift too, which is apparently more than on track.
And I mean, I guess you do have to consider that as well. Like, sometimes maybe 6 months later, having instead of what, like, I actually don't remember what the expectation is at this point, but I mean, if Zen 4 is hitting 5 gigahertz especially, I'm assuming it's going to be a really big uplift over Zen 3. And the 5950X 3D maybe just makes that look, I don't know, 10% worse than it would if they didn't have the X3D come out.
Yeah. And I guess moving forward then, I'm trying to think if there's really anything else to say about this. Well, yeah, I guess there is one more thing. Guys, they just showed Zen 4, and she said all cores are running at 5 gigahertz in an early engineering sample. All cores.
Oh, that's true. And
I'm just going to let you guys know, I know there's rumors, I think from Adora TV was the first one to say it, about Raptor Lake hitting 5.5 gigahertz all core, whereas this is hitting 5.2. Or when I say this, the 12900KS. Yeah. I've heard similar things about Zen 4 boost behind the scenes. So when she says all core boosting 5 gigahertz, yep, I think it might be higher than that for the final one. I don't think this is like a golden sample.
Yeah, and if they're reaching parity for clock speeds with Intel, who knows potentially how much Zen 4 could thrash Raptor Lake if they're both hitting 5.5 gigahertz.
I've always been told, and it's funny, it's usually phrased this way by the AMD sources. Like, they'll start the sentence with the words like, curiously. Like, curiously, we expect to beat Raptor Lake in multi-threading with just 16 cores. Well, guys, right now we have an early engineering sample hitting 5 gigahertz all core. It sounds like Zen 4 will have clock speed parity pretty close with Raptor Lake. I think it will have 10-15% higher IPC. There you go.
Yeah.
That will be the best gaming CPU anyway. So, I don't know. There's a stopgap gaming CPU they're going to launch. If we're being entirely honest, targeted at the i7-12700K, which Bullethead writes in, where do you see AMD pricing the 5800X 3D? It seems to be AMD's last hurrah for AM4, given how bullish they are at AM5 and Zen 4, but it doesn't seem to have anything for anyone with an 8-core or more 5000 series CPUs. I think, it comes out in spring. So what is that technically? End of March at the earliest?
June is technically the end of spring.
No, I'm sorry. It launches in spring. When does spring start?
March to June.
Yeah. So I would say that I think AMD's got a couple months to see how sales go. Intel's taking market share, but not as many as people thought they would with Alder Lake. If that continues, guys, they compared it to the 5900X. They might charge $500 for it.
I was going to say split the difference between the 5900X and 5800X and call it 480. But yeah,
no,
500 is
500.
Yeah, I mean, I think around that is what they'll target. 500 plus or minus $20. Although I don't know at that point why you're taking $20 off.
Although we can't discount that as things improve and things continue, maybe Alder Lake starts taking more market share over time than they thought they might. And if that happens, there's no reason they can't just make the 15, like guys, it's there's no reason they can't make the 5950X600, the 5900X500, the 5800X3D 400 and 350, and like, basically codify what Micro Center's selling these for anyways. Like there's no reason they can't do that. So it's just going to depend on if Alder Lake's taking market share and if they want to just get rid of their last stock, which I think this could be an excuse to do that. Like they could say, here's the $400 5800X3D. Everything else gets a price drop. We're getting rid of our stock before Zen 4 launches. I would just not discount that happening.
Yeah, and if they launch that for $400, that would probably be a pretty good deal, especially because CPUs are way less unreasonable pricing than GPUs right now, at least compared to their MSRPs.
Yeah. Kerry No Sugata writes in, when AMD announced their first Vcache product, I was a bit disappointed by both the limited range of products and by the clock rates. I think it is clocked a little lower. I also downgraded my expectations then for how many Vcache models will be used in Zen 4 desktop processors. Do you think this is an overreaction? After all, this is the first release of a brand new technology that has been many years in the making. Alternatively, do you think it's better to view Vcache as something they were only developing for the server market and its release on the desktop is more about bragging rights than anything else? I don't think that's... everything's just felt for the server market first. Let's be clear about that. But do I think that we should downgrade, which I thought was the interesting question here. Thank you, Kari, for this reader mail. Our expectations for Zen 4, my answer is no. I've always expected kind of half of the lineup to have it. And the fact that it's a 5800 X3D should tell you they're probably going to have at least the middle and up have it with Zen 4 still. It doesn't really change my expectations at all. And again, I don't know this for a fact, but it is my opinion that this isn't about yields or ability or being worth it in terms of like to manufacture it on a low end or across a stack. This is literally about wanting to send more chiplets to Epic. That's what this is about, And I don't think that's, I think Zen 4 will have a decent amount of Vcache models.
Mm-hmm.
Melodic Warrior writes in, I'm willing to wager my entire reputation that Intel's Arc launch is going to be a big success. Would you? No. My entire reputation? Nope.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We don't even know pricing yet, so.
Right, which I guess let me kind of put a timestamp here as we kind of start migrating back into story number 6, which part of it was the 12900KS, but now we got to start talking about Arc and Alder Lake Mobile. So yeah, I've brought the 12900KS. I have another part of a write-up here that continues off of it. Intel also announced their 2+8 and 6+8 mobile CPUs, but frankly, what is there to say? They will probably take the laptop CPU performance crown momentarily. I mean, think about it, guys. The 6+8 model is an i5 with more little cores, a desktop i5 with more little cores. The 90, which already beats the 5800X. The 96 EU graphics will be around the performance of an MX450 if clocked highly, which we've already seen some people clocking Alder Lake's integrated to 2.3 gigahertz, by the way. But it's probably not going to be as good as Rembrandt. And it doesn't seem like Intel is confident they will beat Rembrandt in efficiency consistently because they just did not talk about it during their press conference, which is bizarre. That's usually the thing they talk about with laptops.
Yeah,
so that tells me they're positioning Alder Lake laptop as a huge performance uplift, more so than battery life, whereas AMD did the opposite. Well, AMD actually did both, but
yeah.
Supposedly Arc, according to Intel, is shipping to OEMs now, despite them not saying any specifics about specs or release dates or models, which makes me continue to question that this is a Q1 launch. Yes, they showed off some laptops. I do believe there will be some laptop models launching with them, but I don't think so until mid to late March.
I believe the last podcast we recorded, I predicted that they will be in warehouse shelves in Q1, and that does confirm it, Tom.
Exactly. It's like, and they say shipping now. I believe they've just started production based on the information I have of like, they've already been making some, SoC1 and SoC2s, but these aren't like the main production bulk. Like they're just right about now, I believe, starting SoC2, so the little one production. So, guys, that's going to go on for weeks, and then you got to ship them, and then you got to package them, and then final test. So that's not launching until end of February at the earliest.
That's a couple months, isn't it? Or
yeah,
okay,
from start to finish, pretty much everything I just said. So, I don't know. They keep saying it's shipping, but
it's probably quarter two. Maybe late quarter two.
For most of the products, yeah. Like most of the laptops, I'm directly told by OEMs, making the laptops, guys, will not be ready till late quarter two. So whatever, believe, and so I continue to believe there'll be limited laptop release, especially for the smaller SoC, March, and then very beginning of quarter one, or March 31st as usual. Beginning of quarter two, or March 31st, they can say it's quarter one, some kind of desktop launch, maybe paper launch. And then those will roll out through April. And then you'll start getting more laptops in May. So that's how I continue to say. I just think I have to say that because they keep trying to convince us it's a quarter one launch. And then they still haven't told us anything. It's January.
We know it's not in large scale production at this point. You can firmly say it's probably not quarter one. I mean, just speaking from press releases, I guess
there will be products in quarter one, everyone.
Yeah. There's still the chance for, I guess, a 1 month from now, a press release that they come out in March or something. I think that's possible.
Yeah, certainly.
The timeline of releases for products is usually they officially announce them 3 weeks before they come out. So there's still room, but it's getting smaller, especially with they have a huge platform like CES, and they said literally nothing about it.
Yeah. Today's video is brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com. Whether you're looking to get good deals on PlayStation, Microsoft Office Professional, or both Windows 10 and Windows 11 operating systems, CDKeyOffer.com has you covered. CDKey is a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead, and that's because they have been consistently providing me and Moore's Law is Dead's fans with a service that I think PC gaming just needs. Reasonable operating system and Microsoft Word prices. We all have to use these products, and we don't need to overpay for them if you use CDKeyOffer.com. And you know what? I know I will be using these products later this year for a new Raptor Lake or Zen 4 system, most likely, and I will do so knowing that, well, they're all legitimate keys, and they are going to be delivered to me quickly and promptly when I buy them. Don't waste any more money than you need to this year. Use the link in the description or on screen to go to CDKeyOffer.com, and when you're there, whatever you decide to buy, make sure you use one of these offer codes. Broken Silicon gets you 30% off all Windows software, and Die Shrink gets you 3% off anything else on the website, and this really does help the channel. It helps you save money. Use these offer codes, use the link, go to CDKeyOffer.com today. Bowl Ahead writes in, "Hey Tom and Dan, compared to the all-time greats like Bill Mays and the ShamWow guy, how would you rate Chuck from Intel's presentation in terms of infomercial host power level?" I assume that's the bald guy that was mainly doing the talking at this one. I actually don't remember the names. I guess because I could look that up pretty quickly.
I sent you a picture of Chuck, Tom. He was the guy that was...
oh, really?
Yeah, he was the guy that was at the bench showing off the laptops.
Wait a second. On which platform? I haven't seen it.
On Facebook.
No, it's loading. So
he was the guy.
Slow today.
He was the guy at the bench doing his infomercial promotions of.
The New Jersey bouncer. Yeah,
I would say Billy Mays still outranks him in infomercial power level, but he was a good performer for infomercial standards, I would say.
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I watched the AMD presentation with a lot of attention. I mostly watched the NVIDIA one with attention and started typing up notes during it. And I was eating lunch and doing a couple chores while the Intel one was on. So I honestly don't remember Chuck that much. But what I will say is, call me crazy, I actually think Intel's presentations are fine now. I think they are substantially better than what they used to be. They're better than what AMD's old ones are, and they're better than what NVIDIA's ones are now currently. I will say, though, that the last 15 minutes of the Intel presentation was insanely boring. I don't know what they were thinking, but that's the only thing I would say.
these conferences, you always have or keynotes, I should say, you have your big thing, or one of your big things at a minimum at the end, because that's your closer. Everyone knows how a presentation works. And yeah, I will say, like, I don't know, some of the stuff with the Nvidia presentation, like that I looked through a bit, was kind of funny. Like when they were showing off the 3090 Ti, they didn't like have any graphics or anything. They just like kept cutting to him while he was talking about it, and then cutting back down to the 3090 Ti.
It was edited a bit weird. It was a little weird.
He's still talking about it. I guess we need to cut back to the 3090 Ti.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I guess one thing I did say in my video, though, is we have to remember that Nvidia just isn't catering to gamers anymore with these presentations, because they're all going to buy them anyways. And this is
that's not a bad
for the
point.
AI investors, from my perspective. Did you see that? Now that we're kind of finishing this part of it, I have to bring this up. Did you see that Jensen practically showed he's going on a date in one of the?
No.
You didn't see that? It was in the beginning of my video. There's a part where there's a woman in a self-driving car, and she's like looking up good restaurants in Vegas, and then says, "What's a good wine to go with that?" And then says, "Can we make a reservation for 2? I'll meet Jensen there." And I'm like, did he just brag about a chick meeting him on a date?
I guess he did.
I mean, I was just laughing. Like, did I just see that subtly put in there? Like, what the heck?
What wine goes well with that?
Nobu's head sommelier recommends a crisp white wine like a Sauvignon Blanc with black cod miso. There is availability for a party of 2 at 7:30 p.m.
Can you respond to Jensen to let him know to meet us there tomorrow?
Okay, sending.
And then they also, I thought the tie thing was funny. And I've seen people getting mad, like, hey, they're saying tie. I know internally NVIDIA says tie. I know. But they literally have people in their presentation saying TI. And then the guy just goes back to tie. It's weird.
And I also found a forum post from 7 years ago. People having this exact same conversation, apparently, Tom. So it's an almost decades-long debate. Is it TI or is it TI?
TI.
It's got a Nvidia GeForce RTX 3080 Ti in this thing.
The 3080 Ti and 3070 Ti.
Ti in this thing.
All right, but let's move on. Blokes writes in, a 96 execution unit DG2 GPU clocked to shit 2.3 gigahertz has the potential to perform like a GTX 1060 based on Alder Lake overclocking tests. I should let you figure out what a performance a 300% of that would be. So I guess it's just pointing to like people, I think, and I don't know if I'd word it the way he did. I don't know the exact percentages. I haven't really checked it that much, but I think people are really, really missing the point of Alder Lake integrated graphics testing so far. They're like, it performs this way, and it's like, it's not that impressive. It's like, yeah, it's only 32 execution units, and it turns out you can almost double the clock speed by overclocking it. Yeah. What do you think a 96 or 128 version of this will perform like? And you go, look it up. Oh, look at that. It's competing with AMD and NVIDIA's cards around that power usage and cost as well. So,
well, and actually, that was the thing I wanted to bring up quickly that I forgot. If the 96 compute unit, execution unit, Alder Lake stuff comes out relatively soon alongside Rembrandt, I think that's a somewhat early test case to see how they will perform against each other. That might be the first test case we have to see how it performs against RDNA 2. Even though, before everyone attacks me, I know there's a lot of differences, like it doesn't have Infinity Cache, it's on DDR5 instead of GDDR5, but...
Yeah. Well, but... Yeah, I guess I don't know. I almost said, well, they would give it Infinity Cache if it needed it, but it's different from the consoles where it's like, yeah, I know the PS5 doesn't have Infinity Cache, but it literally, it just has such a bigger bus, and the Series X is a way bigger bus than the teraflops would suggest compared to other RDNA 2. I guess this isn't exactly the same because it's using DDR5. But Timo writes in, hi, Tom and Dan. What's with these events today on the 4th of January? It seems like everyone is holding back their products or just teasing. Nvidia has a new financial year. AMD has Alder Lake breathing down their neck, and Intel has pressure to sell DG2. So what's the holdup? reminding me of an old adage that in engineering, small steps are better than going for the slam dunk in one try. Anyways, I'm just saying the perfect is the enemy of good is what I kind of see going on here. But I don't know. Otherwise, why was there mostly teasers and it feels like everyone's holding back? And my answer is I think Nvidia this is what they've got. And I think Intel, it's almost like they're not really launching their cards in Q1 is what I would argue.
I would say from Intel's perspective, that's definitely true. But, you know, Nvidia and AMD do both have products that are tangible that are coming out within a month. So there was there was real stuff. It's just they've served the high-end market, which is what most people are interested in following, I think. And so for right now, there's nothing that's going to serve the high-end market within the next 6 months from AMD, unless you count the 5800 X3D, which, yeah, I don't know if we would consider that high-end or not. Probably, but
sure, for gaming, yeah. I mean, it'll compete with the best gaming CPUs at least, so I would, at least in terms of gaming high-end. Let me say this, then. This is probably a good time to finally circle back to this. Were you disappointed by the reveals overall, or is this about the level you expected on average if you average together the three conferences, or what?
I mean, we delayed this podcast. It makes sense that we did because we would have been releasing a podcast that's like, it's a news podcast, so episodes inherently aren't evergreen, but it's spoiled the day we release it. Wouldn't have made any sense. So, I mean, I think it was a good decision to delay the podcast from that perspective. But, you know, like, I wasn't expecting Zen 4 to be coming out in March. Like, I wasn't expecting them to say
that. You weren't expecting Zen 3D.
No, I'm saying I wasn't expecting the moon.
Oh. Okay. Well, I don't think anyone was, but...
Okay. I just don't know if you could have expected too much more. The one thing I will say that was definitely missing is ARC should have. I agree. I wish it would have had a more prominent presence. AMD, they showed off the new cards that we were expecting them to show off. They showed off Rembrandt and they showed off briefly Zen 4. I don't think you could have expected too much more out of them, and I kind of think the same thing of Nvidia. Although I will say it is, from Nvidia and AMD, this is like the longest line of products I've ever seen come out. Like, the RDNA 2 has been being released now for, 15 months or something?
One of them's on a different node.
Yeah, I know. It's RDNA 2 and Ampere are getting a little long in the tooth, so I'm excited for them to move on after this, hopefully.
Right. But here's the thing. Everything's selling, even if shortages get better. True. And I think they will by the middle of this year. Not fixed, but get significantly better, at least for AMD's side. I don't think there's literally any incentive to talk about Lovelace or RDNA 3. I did have a source say that they might tease RDNA 3, but I was basically told it's either going to be Zen 4 or RDNA 3, and I kind of thought Zen 4 makes more sense. Like, I wouldn't tease any upcoming graphics cards until supply catches up with demand at all.
And they're still both advertising Ampere and RDNA 2. Why would you? It's low end, so they're different segments, but like, why would you deflate your release of your new graphics card by saying, and in 6 months we'll have this?
Yeah. So I guess if we were to go step by step, AMD first, they showed Rembrandt. They showed a lot of details about it, actually. And they showed a ton of details about upcoming new GPUs. Not all of them are 6 nanometer, like I think we thought a lot more of them would be. It seems like just Navi 24 is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they are still new configurations that take up less space, use less energy. So whatever. There's a refresh on mobile coming out from AMD from top to bottom, kind of. And they are bringing a new performance tier. And they are, like, the 6650 MXT is 20% faster than the one it's replacing. Like I showed this in the video. Okay, so the 6600M was beating the 3060, at least in the benchmark I looked at, by 10% at same power usage. So if they go 20% above that, what, now their mid-range is now just a 3070 competitor? That's why the 3070 Ti laptop's coming out. And Nvidia showed that. The only thing I wonder is if they would show a 3080 12 gigabyte. But again, if it's a 12 gigabyte, that means it's not based on GA 103. So I don't know why you'd launch that yet. Well, there's still, I pretty much what was shown is what I expected out of AMD and Nvidia. The one thing, minus a couple things, like I was just hoping Vcache, there'd be more Vcache talk and products. I was hoping there might be a couple more Nvidia cards shown, but overall it was about what I expected. Arc, I agree. That's the one where I was like, I expected up more. I didn't expect all of it actually yet, because like, unlike other people, I'm telling you, this isn't coming out for a couple months still in reality. So some of them will, but for the most part. So I didn't really expect the full thing on Arc, but I did expect some of them to be at least half revealed. I really think Arc is the thing that is just not there.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely what was missing from this group of press conferences. And I will also say it is interesting. These press conferences, they really do all feel like all three companies are constantly responding to each other now, though, which is nice to see. Like the 5800 X3D and the 12900KS reveals are like both direct responses to each other, which is good. That competition is strong right now.
It's funny. I'm also like, Intel directly mentions Raptor Lake and just glossed over it. I was like, did they forget they haven't announced that yet just because of how many things are leaking before? But I guess they have inadvertently leaked it. But I just think it's funny that they said Raptor Lake and they like haven't really fully like consistently acknowledged it. And they're just like, yeah, and Raptor Lakes, like they're just like, at a certain point, it feels like AMD and Intel are just getting to the point where if something's leaked ahead of time, they're not even going to pretend people don't know.
I mean, I have to wonder, like, is Raptor Lake on Wikipedia at this point? Because if it is, it's like
why act like it's an announcement, really?
Yeah, because it's like Bergamo. I really feel like they were getting ahead of it, like that they announced it themselves, like right before it almost just became a common knowledge thing that it was out.
Yeah. D Money Baller writes in, with Intel's DG2, do you think there will be a popular deep learning framework such as PyTorch or TensorFlow that'll be ported to run there, since most popular frameworks use CUDA? If so, how long do you think it'll take to release? DG3? Yes, I do. Which brings us to story number 7. Intel DG3 Battlemage whispers emerge. Intel goes high-end in 2023, which was the final leak of the year from Moore's Law's Dead. We're right up here. Well, on Christmas break, Moore's Law's had formalized some whispers he had loosely leaked in the previous end-of-fall loose ends. In summary, Intel DG3 Battlemage, or Elasti, again, as first leaked by Moore's Law's Dead, is planned to release in 2023, about 1 to 1.5 years after DG2. Unlike DG2, which targets mid-range GPU performance directly and isn't going for the high end, Elasti is Intel's first full-throated attempt at going for the crown, or at least the high end. And as of now, it cannot be 100% confirmed by all sources that it's multi-die like RDNA 3, but it probably is, based on a couple on the input and the fact that it's supposedly going to compete with Lovelace. And one thing is confirmed, Intel is acting confident about Arc's overall roadmap now in a way that they never were before. Finally, Meteor Lake is also mentioned as being better than people are expecting and possibly hard for AMD to compete with. Anyways, the main thing I'd like to address, actually, I've got some notes here that I noticed after that DG3 Battlemage kind of like more formal version of stuff I was already saying for a while came out, leak, is a lot of people were saying this is a hot take, and it's like, take? This isn't my opinion. That's what they're saying, guys.
And I do have to, just to add to that, well, not reinforce it, like, I would argue, based on what we're predicting the performance of Arc will be, it's almost already licking the heels of high end. It's not quite there, but it's at the top of mid-range, I would say, at least. or will likely be at the top of mid-range at least. So I don't think Intel is getting into graphics card, discrete GPUs to just be in the mid-tier forever. I would assume by the second generation, they would be at the high end, or third generation at the latest.
Right. And I just think there's a couple things people got to remember. I just have it on very, very good authority from multiple people that they've been trying to get multi-GPU working like RDNA 3 supposedly has it working now. Although it's not out yet, so does it really? But you know what I mean? Like, they've been trying to get that working since DG1. And that's a whole saga that I covered, honestly, at this point years ago, where they like had 4 tiles, then 2, then they're like, it's inefficient, so we're just going to make it a 1 tile thing and make it a big tile relative to what the tiles were going to be before, I should say. And we've even seen parts of things that I leaked first, like Arctic Sound, come out, where they showed some of the configurations I had talked about. Yeah. It was like cut down massively and used tons of energy, like I was told it would. Like, Intel's been trying to get multi-GPU working. I don't think we should assume they never will. They were hoping to get it working a while ago, just like AMD was hoping to get Vcache working for Zen 2, but never did. So it is coming, and it makes sense that it would come with DG3. And I think a lot of people are surprised by this because they're like, what? DG2 isn't even out yet, and it won't be out until Q2. And, it's, a card that's only going to compete with mid-range cards that are going to be a year and a half old by the time it comes out. The majority of 2 years old by the time it comes out. Right. But it was also supposed to launch at the end of 2021 or really mid-2020 if they can pull it off. It just didn't. So these are different design teams learning from mistakes made by the previous gen moving forward. It's very reminiscent of RDNA 1. RDNA 1 came out half a year late, only in the mid-range, and they learned from it. And then RDNA 2 came out, well, a year later, a little over a year later.
And I do have to say, though, the timing, I think, will be different with versus RDNA 2, where RDNA 2 pretty much released right on top of Ampere. If my timing for all of this is correct, I think DG3 is still probably going to come out after, decently after RDNA 3 and Lovelace.
Yeah, my understanding is RDNA 3 should drop at the end of 2022, and then RDNA 4 should drop at the beginning of 2024. So if you think about it, okay, so this is, launching a year and a half after DG3 is. That's perfectly respectable distance in time. And it's launching probably about 10 months before RDNA 4. And I don't know, 8 months after RDNA 3. This is totally believable. Like, I saw people in the Discord after this leak came out saying, yeah, is this a hot take? This is interesting. Like, how is it going to beat Lovelace? They would need a node advantage to beat Lovelace. I'm like, yeah, it's coming out like 8 months after Lovelace. It could have a node advantage. Lovelace is, as far as I'm aware so far, TSMC 5 nanometer. This could be 4 nanometer.
Well, yeah, especially if, and it seems like Intel is confident on their timeline now. If their timeline for their nodes is correct, it will have a node advantage probably.
Yeah, and I saw multiple people online arguing about if they can make sense of the leaked. I guess there's some rumored specs out there about it might be like a dual 640 execution unit is what my memory tells me. I honestly haven't checked. I thought I saw that while I was on break. And it's like, I don't know if it is, but what I will say is I don't know that I'd try to make it make sense in either direction. Like, some people were saying that wouldn't be strong enough, to which I would say if it is dual 640 execution unit, so it's more than double a 3070 Ti in performance if it scales well. That sounds like a Lovelace killer, actually. But
I mean, even if there's no IPC increase from DG2, yeah, that's going to be more than twice as strong if it scales well.
Yeah, yeah. So that sounds like that could be Lovelace, actually. But, I wouldn't argue for or against it either way. I would just say, there's a lot we don't know. It's a new architecture. And a lot of people said, it's hilarious. A lot of people said RDNA 2 is only 256-bit, so it can't beat the 3070. Wrong. We didn't know about Infinity
I forgot
Cache.
about that take.
Also, it was funny because it was double wrong. We didn't even know they doubled the CUDA cores or Ampere. So when we try to argue about the specs we know about now, we don't know what cache system they may have, what 3D stacking tech they may do, what node it's on. All I'm telling you guys is they're going for the crown in 2023, about a year after their competition launches, but a year before the follow-ups are, which is a nice cadence for Intel, I think, so they can seem impressive, is beating the previous gen, but also launching before the next gen.
Yeah, and just to this idea of a 640 dual chip GPU that they come out with, even if that's a thing that's currently being tested or planned, there's no way to know if that's what's going to be the product that comes to the market probably 2 years from now. Like, there's no way to know.
Right. Because I think RDNA 2 specs were basically locked in stone about a year before it came out. But more than that, there were a lot of things they were considering. And again, guys, there were RDNA 3 designs that were monolithic again that aimed for more like a 50% increase over RDNA 2. That was their conservative. Like, I've seen an interesting spec sheet for one of them, and it's just, no, they got it working supposedly. So now they're going to do much more. Anyways, though, that's the final story. Let us move on to the wrap up, which is a fairly modest wrap up. We just, frankly, we're running on fumes. I feel like I've said that too many times this episode. But I'm probably said we're running on fumes too many times because I'm running on fumes. So the wrap up's pretty small, but I think no one, honestly, if we talked about what people really want to know about. But, Dan, did you see the new B660 motherboards were tested by Hardware Unboxed, and they have the new Intel cooler? Yeah, I mean, looks decent.
Yeah, it looks good. I mean, it's kind
not
of
as good as AMD is, but
yeah, and it's kind of what we were talking about. Like, cheaper options are going to be a thing in the future with all their
the 12700 non-K, which this should be really good, depending on the price, which, I think probably 350 is quite a possibility as the real street price, at least. We already saw at Micro Center the 12700K going down to like 330 during Christmas period. Geez, what a good deal. And let's see what else we got here. Norton Virus added an Ethereum miner to their software. I just thought that was funny. And I saw some people arguing this was horrible, but I have seen counter arguments that this is so you don't need to use a different Ethereum miner that will be flagged as a virus, is their argument. Although, for being honest, it's a way for them to take a cut out of Ethereum mining.
Oh, I'm sure. It's an antivirus software company. I'm sure it's not like super great.
What do you mean? Antivirus companies are always awesome. Well, so the final one here was added at the last minute. I didn't make it a major story because I don't feel like we had enough time to properly cover it like one. But I guess Sony just announced PlayStation VR2.
I still don't think at this point it's worth getting the coverage of a full story. Anyways, it's high resolution. I guess 2000 by 2040 per eye, which I never remember resolutions, but that's certainly a lot higher than what it was on the first PSVR.
Yeah, I believe the first one was 1080p, 120 hertz, and now I was always told they were targeting 1440p per eye. This is somewhat close to that, but not quite there. Yeah. Actually, let me do some math here because I am curious literally what it is. Wow, yeah, that's over double 1440p is what I'm seeing here. Right? 2000 times 2040 times 2. And then 1440p is 2560 by 1440. So then it's a hair below 4K. Wow, yeah, that's pretty aggressive.
And I'm trying to remember, I think that's higher resolution than other stuff that's on the market right now. So this time around, they're not going for I guess, entry level kind of is what you could call PSVR 1, where it's really good. I mean, it worked well, but it definitely had some of the issues with VR, the screen door effect, because it was just lower resolution.
Yeah. It looks like they're trying to target something. I guess there's actually two things to keep in mind with this. So yeah, 110 field of degree view, which is decent. I know there's higher ones, but that's probably the one thing they compromised on, I guess. Almost 4K total resolution, which is this isn't the highest. I mean, there are 4K per eye VR devices.
Well, I'm looking at a list of all VR devices. The highest is 2880 by 2720, which is
insane. Yeah. So I think what they're doing here is they're like, hey, look, 120 hertz is what we're going to stick to because that's what we think consoles will reliably do for a long time. We're sticking to a resolution that's above 1440p per eye. And I think they're doing that because they know they still use PSVR 1 with the PS5. I think this is them going, hey, there's going to be a PS5 Pro. This is still probably going to be used with the PS6 potentially. So let's make it so it can last.
Yeah, and I think it will. Like it's coming out, I would assume probably next year, maybe late this year. There will be other devices that come out that are higher resolution than it, but this is, as far as VR devices currently stand, I think at the higher end for as far as resolution goes.
Yeah, and I guess they announced a new Horizon game for it, or who knows what that is. I haven't, again, guys, we haven't really looked into this. And yeah, I mean, wireless, yeah, and of course they put the cameras on the yeah, so it is 4 cameras for headset and controller tracking, IR camera for eye track. Yeah, so it should be way less cumbersome. I'm a little disappointed as always, but we've known this for a while because they said it a year ago that it will still need a USB Type-C to plug into. Oh, I wonder why they put that on the front of the PS5 at launch. Yeah, for this.
Yeah.
But I was hoping to be wireless. When I see this resolution, well, now I know why it's not wireless.
Yeah, that's the big disappointment, though. It would be great if it could be wireless, although one USB-C cord as opposed to what was going on with the first one is a lot better. As opposed to
just the Rube Goldberg machine you had to set up to use it before.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's not all of these like lighthouses and sensors around it. I think you're halfway there to it not being cumbersome. The difference between having to set up a bunch of sensors everywhere, all these cords to just, there's one cable you plug into the console below your TV. That is actually like way better now that I think about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let us move on to the final reader mails then. Daniel Dewar writes in, hi, Tom, QQ. When we look at how well each GPU performs at different resolutions, the performance numbers are pretty digestible. How does this translate to VR? For sim racing, for instance, does one need to view VR as closer to 4K than 1080p? How much does this vary by VR headset type? Really, I'm just looking for some guidance so I can decide if I need to switch to triple monitors to make GPU shopping easier. I mean, just do what we were talking, what I literally did. I added up the pixels, and the PSVR will be over double what 1440p is, and it will be a hair, what is it like? I don't know, like, what is this, like 4%, 3% lower resolution than 4K? So I would say, just do that with whatever you're doing and compare to the closest resolution. I would say most VR devices target a resolution between 1440p and 4K. So whatever you see in 1440p, cut it down by 20% for most of them. But I mean, again, it's like there's so many out there, as you just said, Dan. That's really how you think about it.
Yeah.
Tickler writes in, do you see future graphics cards using DDR5 or LP DDR5 in place of GDDR6, or Apple's SoC is an anomaly? Yes, I do. I don't think they're going to use GDDR5. I think so.
They can't use GDDR5 forever. That's going out of production, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you saw that with DDR3 for a while, didn't you? I would assume maybe some low-end cards will have DDR5 on it, although DDR5 is relatively expensive, so I don't know how that computation compares, but
I'm told it's really only 20% more than DDR4 for most of these OEMs at most.
Yeah,
sometimes 10%, as low as 10%. Some of them said to me. So I would just say that long term, yeah, I think definitely.
Yeah.
Patrick P. Gelsinger, Intel CEO, writes in, how nice. Do you think the delay of the Steam Deck is not actually hardware related and in fact related to software? It could be that Proton is not where they need it to be for it to work well and that this is causing the delays. I think it's shipping.
That makes sense.
I mean, wasn't it going to come out as a limited launch in December anyways?
Yeah.
So yeah, all of the jam ups and yeah, I literally think that it was almost entirely shipping, but there's always a little bit of software. They're probably like, we could probably use another month of polishing with half of our team getting COVID every now and then.
Yeah. And, I guess I don't know what their standard is for Proton, like when it comes out, because as it stands, it is decent already. I would say pretty good already. And I think people buying this like have to just know that there's the caveat that some games won't work very well because it's Proton.
Mm-hmm. QH Freddy writes in the loose ends you mentioned AMD considering a mobile product on Samsung. Could this be related to the RDNA and the latest Samsung Exynos phone SoCs? Are they maybe eyeing the possibility of making more phone SoCs with AMD IP for the broader phone market? Well, I would just say yes. Of course, that's something they're considering. They are always considering making more money with more products. In terms of what I was talking about, I believe in a recent Broken Silicon with you, or I don't remember if it was, I think it was you. I just think there's been those rumors of them talking to Samsung about 3 nanometer, if I remember correctly. And I was like, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that was for like some APU. You know, I didn't really mean it for phones. Although obviously that might help, getting Samsung to use it on one of their nodes gives them some cross-design experience, and that's a good starting point. So there's some of that there. But no, I meant literally like, I think I keep seeing people like, oh, they're talking to Samsung. Oh, that must mean RDNA 4 is on Samsung. Oh, they're doing this. That must mean that. I think they want to use every manufacturer because there's just a lot of market share they can still take.
Yeah.
Phone SoCs, laptop APUs. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, companies have sourced from different foundries forever. So
yeah. Uni writes in, hi, Tom and Dan. This question is actually for you both in both of your opinions. Do we feel that Apple with their M1 chips will soon make a move to the business enterprise side of tech, such as servers to the likes of AMD's EPYC? So if you phrase it like EPYC, I say no. But if you say servers, I give it a soft yes. I think they're going to build server CPUs and APUs for their servers. That's what I think they're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a definite yes. Like at some point, some servers at Apple will be Apple using Apple CPUs. Whether they're going to start selling them to other companies, I think remains to be seen.
I don't think for a few years, but
yeah,
it's not out of the realm of possibility. Were they now a $3 trillion freaking company?
They will be if they do that.
Speaking of centralized incredible amounts of money, writes in with a question. He says, what do you think about NFTs creeping their way into games? Ubisoft, of course, has tried it, and Stalker 2 was announced with an NFT integration, though have since removed all mention of it from their Twitter, I guess. That's funny.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
They pulled all of it, I think, like a day after they said, we're putting NFTs in the game.
Really? I don't blame them. I bet they got a bunch of hate for it. What do I think about NFTs creeping their ways into games? I think it's unnecessary and stupid.
I mean, watch, that stupid 8-minute pilot for a cartoon they put out. It's absurd. There's an 8-minute cartoon, and because each character in the cartoon is technically owned by a person, the credits are like 3 minutes long because there's so many it's absurd, I guess, is my point. And I think putting NFTs in games is also absurd.
It's just unnecessary. And, long-time listeners and viewers of Moore's Law's Den will know that I'm not some crypto hater. I certainly don't hate Bitcoin, and I think there's potential with some things being worked on. But NFTs kind of just seem like a scam to me, guys. Not everything needs to be on the blockchain. Like the entire point of Bitcoin is that they found a way so you can't duplicate money, like copy and pasting. And that's literally just like the simplest form of storing data. Like everything else, like NFTs, you can copy and paste a picture. Oh, but I have my name on the blockchain. Yeah, but you still don't even own the copyright. You don't own anything, dude. You just paid money to have your name on a blockchain saying you paid money to have a picture that everyone's copying and pasting. You can't copy and paste Bitcoin money. It is uncopyable. That's why Bitcoin has value. You can't copy NFTs.
Yeah, and the whole thing with like the Stalker NFTs, was essentially just a gimmick to like get your like likeness put into the game as an NPC. And if they were trying to do something like that, they could have done that without an NFT.
Exactly. It's like we have servers for storing this stuff, and like putting it on an Ethereum blockchain doesn't help anything.
It'd be like, oh, pay $1,000 to be a producer in the game and have an NPC of you. They could have just done that if they wanted to, and it would have been the exact same thing as the NFT. And I think it would have caused less outrage because at least they're being upfront with what they're doing.
Right. And and so were they taking a cut of the profits for you putting it in the game?
I have no clue how the NFT, they minted
integration worked.
I think they minted like 14 NFTs.
Oh, so they were maybe selling them themselves. Oh, I didn't know. Now I see why people got pissed at them. I thought it was like, because the thing I've heard is like maybe you could like tie like a token on a blockchain to a skin that's randomly generated in the game, and then no one else can find the exact same skin. That
might have been what
I
think they said they were selling 100 NFTs.
Okay, but they're selling them, so it's not like it's a randomly generated thing they're not profiting off of. I see why there's outrage.
Yeah.
That's about all I care to say about it. I think they're dumb. I'm just gonna say it. I don't. I'm just not afraid to say that. You know, it's like, let's be honest. A lot of the art world is already just money laundering, and now this is just like that times 10.
Now it's money laundering, except for now it's $500 million for a picture of a monkey.
Anyways, I guess that's just gonna about do it for this episode. We've nailed this, Dan. We keep just pretty much hitting around the same length of episode every time. But we got another big guest coming up. Decent chance I'll do another video this week after this comes out. And I guess, I don't know. I'm exhausted. I'm falling asleep. The final thing I'll just say is, as always, so check that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel, ring the bell button, subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead on a podcast app of your choosing, set it to download, subscribe to 100 podcast apps and set it to download. This helps our numbers and, gets Apple to start recommending us to other people or other podcast apps too, like Stitcher and Google Podcasts to start and Spotify to start recommending us to other people that might not watch the YouTube channels, and if you want to get this early and ad-free and submit reader mails to me and the upcoming guests and get exclusive podcasts like Die Shrink, consider supporting us on Patreon. Throw some cheddar our way.
Go to the Patreon.
Go to the fucking Patreon. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Anthony Garefa, GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yant, Thomas Rupp, I love you, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Loud, Lynn Lee, Justin Parrish, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, Jackson A. Miller, Jesse Jeskowiak, Josh Law, JBG, Travis Gooding, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Disaru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA81, Nathan Mose, Cole Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, F7GOS, Matthew Landavaso, My Name is Nobody, Judson N, Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchek, Rentaro Matsukata, John Jameson, Sam Benzel, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Jan Rounder, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Meyer Techrans, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Groth, 3DS Boy 08, Dominique Koch, Stefan, Original Ross, Sandy Garrido Sanderson, Joaquin Hagen, Teak Autumn, Sol Connor, Michael Casa, Andrew S. C. Chitz, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Acker, Endless Loggins, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Zoot Taylor, Trevor Powers, Stu Olenya, Nanan, Daniel Nishwal, Franco Frederick, Dan Galanowski, Ian Clifford, Axel Cisneros, Leighton Perry, Joseph Kierman, Brett Summers, Blake, Donovan Russell, Noah Nicoella, Zlicky, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulin, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Barucha, Jeremy So, Mitchell Pell, Brett Summers, Eddie Del Castillo, Josie Floria, Luis Correa, Deke, Cheesy Ramen, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou Markelli, Dave McCoy, Valco Malev, Game Langner, Ronnie, DNA Tech, Michael Deaton, MJB1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Sarcastro, My Sharona, Y Tree, Roman, William W. Draper, Air Rats, Spamton G. Spamton, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amiable Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Sammy Malas, James Anderson, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Meat and Pork, Jimmy NG, Mats, Matthew Lazier, Benjamin Oshley, Mark Mitchell, Shield TV Couteau, Aaron, John Wisink, Mohammed, Jean DeBont, Post Media, Sean Aston, Ashmont, Daniel Dewar, Stefan Zhang, JSMMH, Georgie Kostadinov, PC Beast 23, Reginald Ari, Narathiel, Ivan, Charles Russell, Hal Booma, Akarsh Aditya, The Grid, Andrew S., Chris Rich, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.